Hello Orchid friends, welcome back to my channel. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, staying healthy and staying safe. Today we're going to look at one of my favorite purple orchid. This one is called Yang Blueberry. I have another blueberry, but it was produced by a different nursery, so it has a different name and then a parentheses blueberry, but this one is called Yang Blueberry. The purple is one of the major attraction when I decided to buy this orchid. It was very interesting in that the purple or slash reddish purple is so intense, and the actual flower is also really waxy. Later in the video you'll be able to see the waxiness as well as a comparison next to my purple martin blooms. Also, this video contains 2 bloom cycles, photo and video footages. Currently, you're looking at its previous year's winter bloom, and then you're gonna see its summer bloom the following year. Another thing about this orchid is under my care, for some reason, it doesn't really have a very set specific time to bloom. So it's almost free flowering. Whenever it wants to bloom, it would bloom. I know Violacea is a summer blooming orchid species, but this one does have Violacea indigo in it. However, it doesn't always only bloom in summer. I've had this one bloom in December. I have this one bloom in April, and also obviously summertime. So it probably has to do with the other parent that is more of a free blooming type of orchid. So this one maybe has that capability as well because of the other parent. But if you look at it here, this has been repotted since. And the reason I wanted to repot the orchid was because the root system wasn't looking all that great. But since the repot, the roots has really taken off. However, I still feel that this orchid can do better, so I'm still trying to figure out how to improve. Maybe after this particular, after next bloom cycle, which you'll see in a minute, I may actually repot it into a different container and reposition this orchid, because this orchid is actually relatively leaning forward and it's just not in its most optimal position. And here you can see I do have drainage holes at the bottom, so this orchid currently is grown in a traditional setup, hence the drainage holes. But then I use inorganic media. For the most part, it's the hydrocorn, the bigger pebbles. I only sparingly threw in a couple smaller pebble called manto clay. But I think next time around, if I do repot this orchid, I would try to increase the smaller pebble ratio so that it's probably close to 1-to-1 than right now, mostly only bigger pebbles. And here is a side-by-side comparison, because my purple martin did have some bloom overlap with the Yang Blueberry, so I decided to put them side by side for you to see just how they compare in terms of coloration. Obviously, purple martin is really more blue than purple, or I would say maybe even violet, and then Yang Blueberry has a very saturated reddish purple color. But Yang Blueberry's lip, though, in the video it still shows a little bit of redness to it, but in person that lip is actually relatively blue as well. Yang Blueberry also is a sequential bloomer. I have had it rebloom sequentially for me previously, so it's always a good practice to keep the orchid spike. Don't cut it when it's still green. And this is its second blooming photos and footage. It was in the summertime, so after a good 6 to 8 months, this orchid decided to put out a secondary spike from one of the nodes of the main flowers, the first flower spike. And at this time, it only gave me 1 flower, but it was still a nice extra surprise because I didn't expect it to bloom, but it put out a secondary spike, and I was obviously thrilled. Who am I gonna argue? Well, I'm not gonna argue with flowers. I'm not gonna argue with any orchid that would give me flowers. This orchid is super fragrant, and I would describe the fragrance to be very close to the fragrance of Violacea. You have that extra spiciness, that cinnamony spiciness to it. It's not super sweet like my Bellina, but it's also, consider a strong fragrance as far as I am concerned. It's very waxy, and if you try to touch the flower petal, you will be able to feel it being really substantial. The entire flower is pretty sturdy. It's not soft or flimsy at all. In terms of care, I do give this orchid a good soak relatively often because I only give this because this orchid has a lot of big pebbles in the container, and if I only pour 1/4 of a cup into the container, the water just gets down to the very bottom of the cup too quickly, and the pebbles in the midsection and the top section don't tend to get enough water retention. So I feel the orchid does a lot better when I use the double cup method and fill up the water to about 80-90% and let it soak for a good 10, 15, or even 30 minutes. Sometimes when I forget, I let it soak for an hour, and then I let the water drain out completely and then put it back at its own regular location. And usually that is good for at least 7 days, but most of the time 10 days, and I can still see a little bit of water at the bottom. So this orchid can easily go without water for 2 weeks. And as you can see here, the orchid is leaning very much toward one side already. So like I said, if I do repot this orchid after this bloom cycle, I will adjust it so that it would be more upright, and then I would also adjust its position on my growing rack so that way it will grow toward a different direction to hopefully kind of correct this pendant nature of orchids. And this is just to give you a quick sense of how the roots have progressed. It has grown even more roots, and some roots are pretty wet at the moment, but overall this orchid is doing pretty good, I would say. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!